Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
I'm Terry Woolman, and my guest today is Cosmo Wilson. I appreciate you joining us every week and would like to share my intention that inspires this podcast. Time passes quickly, and I've learned that we should do what's in our hearts and do it well without apologies or excuses. I encourage you to create your life and art in your own unique way and express your artistry with joy and with abandon. Be willing to work uncompromisingly for what you believe in. Success will have a better chance of finding you when you live your life with integrity, focus, and passion. Be selfish with your discipline and selfless in your performance, and don't forget to have fun along the way. By the way, if you're joining us live today in our virtual audience, we will be inviting questions and comments during the second half of our show, so make it count. Simply request an invite to speak, and my moderator, Dr. Lisa, will bring you on stage to join our conversation. Let me tell you about my guest today. Cosmo Wilson is an American concert lighting designer and director who has been a leader in our industry since 1986. He has worked with over 40 major rock acts, including Aerosmith, AC/DC, Black Sabbath, Emerson Lake Palmer, Foreigner, INXS, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Loaf, Mötley Crüe, the Rolling Stones, Ronnie James Dio, Lee Roth, Scorpions, and Rod Stewart. He began his career as a touring road crew member with The Cure, Genesis, Barbara Mandrell, INXS, Crowded House, and various other acts before becoming a director and designer. Cosmo received a Parnelli Award for Lighting Director of the Year in 2015, a TourLink Top Dog Award for Lighting Director of the Year for AC/DC in 2016 and with Aerosmith in 2017, and the Live Production Summit Pinnacle Awards for both Lighting Director of the Year and Lighting Designer of the Year in 2020. Cosmo Wilson, welcome to Making It.
Well, thank you. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be on your show, and this is really looking forward to this.
And I'm so happy to have you here too. And we haven't seen each other since, well, it's been a couple of years, I think. So there's so many things I want to talk to you about. And I know that there's a lot of things that you want to talk to me about as well. I want to start with something personal, which I find really interesting because we're both from Florida. And you grew up in the Orlando area. I grew up in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
But you still live there,
Yep.
in that general area. And my question to you is, having circled the globe more than most people that I know, I mean, you've been touring for a good portion of your life, and spending a lot of time in other parts of the world. You used to go out like for 6 months at a time. How have you managed to have your career and do it in the same area that you grew up in, and why did you choose, living in that area? Because I'm sure you've seen lots of great places to live.
Well, I mean, my dad was an architect, so I traveled quite a bit when I was young. I lived in Miami when I was very young, and Orlando, Chicago, and New York. My grandparents, my grandparents, they built a home inside the Ocala Forest in 1960. So that was there my whole life. So we always went there for, holidays, summer. So that was a constant. And, it was in the woods on a lake. So I'd hunt and fish. And that really, I fell in love with Florida, plus the beaches. I'm a big fan of launches. So Florida has always had the attraction for me. Chicago is too cold. I love New York City. It's my favorite city in the world. But back when I was working with Backline as a backline tech in New York, I kind of decided I had to live in one place or the other, Florida and New York. And at the time, New York is expensive, of course. And the thing with New York is it's always on. And Florida is laid back. And I thought I can always go to New York and turn it on when I want to be there. But Florida, it's quiet and laid back. So I kind of decided to make my home in Florida. And that's how I decided to stay there.
That makes complete sense to me because I love Florida as well for all the same reasons. And I didn't know that we also had the Ocala National Forest in common because my parents co-owned a summer camp, Camp Ocala,
Wow.
in the forest. So
Yep.
so I know that area very well. We spent every summer there, from the time I was born until probably I was about 14 years old before they ended up selling the camp. So I grew up canoeing and learning
Yep.
how to make fires and identify snakes and and all of that stuff. And it was Florida with well, any place has its challenges.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about some of the things that are going on, politically. There's is often a little unraveling to me. However, I love Florida. It's a beautiful, beautiful state, and I can see why you live there. And bravo for you, because for me, I felt like when I got out of college, I needed to either live in New York or California to be in the
Right.
music industry. You haven't, and I admire you for that.
Well, I'm fortunate, because getting on the road and in my part of the business, being a lighting designer, a road crew, whatever, it doesn't really matter where you live. I mean,
Right.
I was fortunate that when I first started working as a road crew, they would put me up in Dallas because that's where the lighting company was located. So I didn't have to live in Dallas to put the shows together. And since I was a touring crew member, it wasn't a big deal. However, if I had worked in the lighting shop full time, they would have I would have had to live in like Los Angeles or a city where there was a lighting company.
So you mentioned New York, and I know, your dad had a place there as well when you were growing up, so you would spend a lot of time there. But you also did something that was very near and dear to you and to all of us in this country and in the world, which you were involved in creating the World Trade Center Tribute in Light, to honor all of the victims of September 11th. And I'm wondering, can you just tell a little bit about that? Because it's such a fantastic project.
Well, it really is. I mean, I wasn't involved in the original creation of it, but I am involved in the actual building of the system, I should say. I just, my love of New York, and when that happened, it was heartbreaking. In many, many ways, of course, like it was for every American, the world in general. But I just made it a pilgrimage up there every year on September 11th. And I didn't make it every year because sometimes I had gigs, but I was, probably out of the past 19 years I've been there. Michael Ahern, who was the production manager for the Stones, he's the one who got the ball rolling on doing the Tribute in Light in 2001. So I'd go there every year and I'd see them. And then last year they nearly canceled it. And things happened, and thank God we managed to get it back up and going again. And I was invited to come on and be on the crew to set the lights in place. And so that was a real honor for me, and to be there at that on the anniversary. And the 20th anniversary is coming up, so I'm hoping that I'll be available to go do it this year as well. It's an incredible thing to be there, and the team that works it, you can just tell it's a passion to be there, and we all share the same sentiment for wanting to be there.
Even having gone to the museum there, one of the times that I was in New York, after after this horrible tragedy in our world history, going into the museum, all of the docents there also have the same kind of passion that you were speaking about too. It doesn't surprise me to hear you say that, because everybody involved has more than a personal experience. It's not just like it's not just from a distance. It's a very direct personal experience with either having lost friends and family personally, or just being so having New York be such a part of who they are that they can't not be there. So I can see that must be very rewarding. I would probably guess, of all the many things that you've done, that this would be one on the list of the things that you were very proud to be a part of.
Oh, I mean, big time. It is. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't compare with any other. I mean, I've done big shows and big audiences and big cities, but yeah, nothing compares to this one. I mean, this is the honor to be there. It is such a. It's really hard to explain, but you're right. It is to be there, to be part of it, it's something bigger than yourself, and it means so much.
I want to talk about your personal life and also your career. And let's start with your career right now. As far back as I could find in preparing for our conversation is your career officially began in 1979.
Yep.
Working with a power pop band called Speedies. And you worked with them for 2 years.
Well, I worked for Falconetti. Speedies was the band I worked for a little bit. Falconetti was the main band I worked for them.
Got it. Okay. And then you started your production company, Cosmo Enterprises, Inc. in 1986. In 1989, you ended up working with the Rolling Stones and Crowded House. But do I have the timeline right, more or less, as to when you started?
More or less, yeah. Yeah.
So what led to that first job in 1979? What led to you creating your own company? And the thing I'm even more curious about is what happened in those couple of years between those credits, because I know it's not that nothing happened, but there's a gap of time, like in many of our careers in the entertainment industry, where there aren't a lot of credits, but I know you were working. So
right.
How did you lead from 1979 to essentially 1989 when all of a sudden you're working with the Stones?
Well, I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, actually in high school and before '79, I was in a rock and roll band, so I had this passion for music.
What's your instrument?
A guitar.
Okay.
I saw Kiss in 1976, and that turned me on to, I always loved music as a child, but when I saw Kiss in concert, I mean, what the first band you're going to see is something like that. Talk about everything: confetti, pyro, costumes. That's when I fell in love with live music, and I was in a band, and I moved to New York in 1978. And a friend of mine that I'd gone to high school with in New York said that a band called Falconetti, and they were pretty big in New York at the time, they needed a drum tech. And I didn't know, I'd never been a tech before. He says, "Can you do it?" And I said, "Sure." I never said no. So that's how I started. I came in and I was the drum tech for Falconetti, and then that led to other jobs: guitar techs, keyboard techs, backline tech. And then I went back to Florida in the early '80s, and I had some odd jobs. I worked at Arby's.
Oh.
I worked in a couple of scenic companies. We made scenery for big trade shows and theme parties and stuff like that. And then I started working for the local union, which then led me to being a stagehand in Lakeland again. And the first show I worked in Lakeland, as ironic as it would be, is Kiss. And that was in 1983. So I worked concerts for about 3 years. And then in '86, I got asked to go on the road with The Cure, which led into Genesis Invisible Touch. I started working for the lighting company out of Dallas, like I said before. I did one tour after another as a lighting crew guy. I was running lights for the opening acts, because that's what, the touring lighting crew do. And then I got to be on the Stones as the crew chief in 1989. And the way I became the LD is the guy that was running lights at the time left to do Tina Turner. But before he left, I would come in and fill in for him. The show was 3 hours, and he would have to get up to use the restroom. So I would sit down and run a song or two. And I guess what happened is the guys, the designers, and he saw that I had talent. So we went to Japan, and they asked me to run lights for the Stones for the rest of the tour. And fortunately, after that, I went from being a lighting crew guy to the lighting director and operator, and that led to more tours as a director, operator, and designer.
And as somebody who is a musician, what drew you towards lighting more than sound? Like, how did being a tech and being a drum tech and guitar tech and things, how did you not become an engineer?
Well, this is a funny story that I like to tell. I mean, first of all, I am an artist. My family, I come from my father's side as a family of artists. My uncle is a really well-known artist in Oklahoma. But your dad was an architect too, right? He was an architect as well. He was quite the artist as well, but he was an interior designer, especially for offices. But the way I became a lighting guy is generally when a show loads into an arena, say, the trucks come in, and the first things off the truck is the lighting gear. But basically what you do is you go to the back of the truck and you get a box and you roll it to the back of the stage. And this is as a stagehand, I'm saying. Then you go back to the truck and you get another box and you roll it to the back of the stage. And I wanted to work. I didn't want to push boxes. So I realized after about 2 gigs that the first guys that went to work were the lighting guys. So I would gravitate towards the back of the stage when I saw them forklifting up, trusses and lighting and cables, and inevitably the traveling crew chief would say, I need 4 guys on stage to bolt together trusses or something. And the minute I heard that, I was on that stage in a second, because it meant I went to work. So that's how I got into working with the lighting, and I enjoyed it. I mean, I worked on sound crews and, I did other things, the carpenters and stuff, but I just really enjoyed lighting and focusing the lighting and running truss spots. And then I ended up going on the road as a lighting guy. That's, so that's how I ended up there. And it's funny, it wasn't purposeful, but it was because I didn't want to push boxes.
It's funny, but it doesn't surprise me, because I know a big part of your philosophy on life is that you trust life. Like you really, you have a sense of, we were talking about, we've spoken about it before, but you just have this faith that, that you are where you are supposed to be. And if you show up and do the work, you don't have to sweat the other stuff. Everything will fall in alignment. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I think it started out as an innate thing with me. It's like when I talk about, there's a general thing about, I find that when I follow my passions, I make a living. But if I go after making money, it's never as fun so I just follow the universe. I trust in the universe. And as I said, it was kind of an innate thing I think I was born with. I think every human's born with it. It's just the term blind faith, just a lot of people don't have it and they sweat it. But I just have the faith and I never say no. Like I said, I always say yes to something. And I mean, I wouldn't say yes to landing an airliner, but I'd try. I have this just blind faith, and it's very difficult to get over that. But once I got over it, like my wife always says, let go, let God. I just know when you have that faith that things are going to work out, they do.
And it's interesting to hear you say that, Cosmo, because you're not just even talking about you personally, but you have employees. I mean, you run a business that way too. You have your own company. You run crews. There's a lot of responsibility, and you're doing it. This isn't just some sort of. By the way, I agree with you. I've lived my life that way as well, but oftentimes it's just about me or my immediate band or the group of people that I'm in charge of when I'm producing. But you've expanded that, and I'm really kind of in awe that you do that. That your mission statement is to follow your passion, and the money will come. And when you follow the money and not your passion, it doesn't work as well from a business point of view.
That's exactly how I feel about it. I mean, it's, I think it's been said by several stars, but if you do what you love for a living, you'll never work a day in your life.
Right.
And as I said, I've been very fortunate. I followed my passions and I managed to make a living.
Yeah, but also people need to know, because I know this about you. Don't get this twisted. You're not afraid to work.
Oh no, 100%. Well, no,
but it doesn't feel like work because you love it so much.
I've worked my butt off, and I've worked many long hours and stuff. Oh yeah, I've worked, but I've enjoyed it. Right. It's the end result is such enjoyment.
When you started your company and started taking on the responsibility of payroll for other people and all the things that come with that, did that come natural to you? I mean, where did you learn that to be a good businessman?
Well, I mean, I think that's an innate thing. My dad was quite a businessman. I mean, as far as my company goes, I don't really do payroll or anything like that with the crew. Basically, when I do a tour, I have my crew, my lighting crew and stuff, and they're paid through the lighting company. So I run the crew, but they're not on my business end of it, if you know what I'm saying. I mean,
right.
My business end is just a couple of employees.
You know, one of the things that you're known for also, speaking of running a crew, is when you're on the road, you love taking your crew on sightseeing trips.
Well, that's a bigger, that's just a part of it. But yeah, I mean, when I first went on the road, I mean, before I went on the road, I was so interested with traveling and seeing other places. And, you know, for me, they existed in books and photos and books and movies and television. I wanted to go see, you know, these places. I wanted to go see the Big Ben and the Eiffel Tower, and I wanted to taste the foods and meet people. So I always had that. So this job was perfect for me. And when I first went on the road, there were guys who wanted to go out. They would take me under their wing and show me things and like restaurants and sites. And as you know, shortly after I went on the road, I decided, you know, I would go out on my own if nobody was going to be there with me. And now that I'm older, I always, you know, I do every couple of days, I do like a day sheet that says what to do on a day off, where to go eat. You know, I've always kept a black book of restaurants and sites, and I take the crews out and I give everybody the opportunity. I mean, well, I do this thing in Berlin. It's called the Berlin History Walk. And one time I had 20 guys, 20 of the crew walk. We walked 8 hours all around Berlin and just took in the sights, and it's become legendary now.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. I agree with you. You know, the very first time that I went to Rome or to Greece and, you know, stood at the Colosseum or walked to the top of the Parthenon, all of a sudden, all of what felt like boring history, world history, when I was in junior high school, became three-dimensional.
Yeah, it was real.
It shifted for me. It was a profound catharsis or metamorphosis that I had being in those places, and I went, now I get it. Now I don't even know why I was so resistant to it, but it was just some of that didn't connect with me growing up. I was always curious. I always loved to travel, but memorizing dates of wars and things like that, it took on a whole new meaning when you're there. When you're there, and you realize that we are all a part of a collective world history.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you stand in the same places that, you know, world leaders have stood, good or bad. I mean, you go stand in places where Hitler was, and you go, holy mackerel, this guy really existed. This happened. You go to Japan, you know, where, you know, to Hiroshima, where they dropped the bomb, and you stand at ground zero there, and you realize this happened here. You know, it's not just a book or a movie. You're like you said, it becomes real. Three-dimensional is a great way to put it.
Is that part of the reason you're so fascinated about World War II and Vietnam, and, you know, is it from your traveling that it's created like a passion for that part of our history?
Well, I was passionate about that kind of history before I traveled. That was one reason I wanted to travel. I mean, especially war brings out the best and the worst of humans. Mm-hmm. You know, there's nothing else that brings up one extreme to the other, from pure evil to the best, things that people do. So, you know, I was into it before. You know, I love airplanes and I built plastic models, and I was into, but, you know, once I started traveling and going to these places and visiting, you know, the stuff that I'd read about and, you know, these things that had happened, it brought it to life. You know, it was suddenly real. Like going to the Berlin Wall, mm-hmm. When it came down, and standing in the no man's land, you know, standing in Hitler's bunker, going, you know, what the way World War II ended, it's happened right there.
Right.
You know, and it was just incredible standing in a spot where this historical moment happened. You know,
you're talking about your favorite things about traveling. What are your least favorite things about traveling?
It's funny. I mean, it's like some people say, "What's your least favorite place?" And I don't know. I find the worst part of traveling is hard to complain about, because there's so many of the great things about traveling. I mean, you know, the long flights. You know, I mean, I've heard people complain about flying to Europe. I'm like, it's 8 hours. It's right. It's a night's sleep, and you're there. You know, I mean, it's nothing. You know, oh my God, it's 8 hours. It's 14 hours to Australia. It's like. Exactly.
Quit your whining.
It's nothing, and you're there. And you know, I think the worst part about traveling is just the waiting. You know, especially nowadays with security and stuff. But mm-hmm. you know, I take it all in stride, and you know, delayed flights suck, and but for the most part, you don't remember those. You remember all the good things you're doing and the places you've seen, and at least I do anyway.
Yeah. On your website, or one of the places that I was looking, your job title is concert lighting designer and ambiance coordinator.
Yeah.
Is that a term you came up with, or what does that mean to you?
Well, it's a long time ago on a tour, and we won't get any names of anything, but there was a guy on the tour who supplied, shall we say, drugs and other good things that you would do on tour. But he supplied the ambiance. So I always laughed at that, because he was the ambiance coordinator, and I look at ambiance to me as this your surroundings and the enjoyable things around you, and that's what it's like people used to call me the cruise director, like from Love Boat. And I always kind of did it as a joke, as the cruise director, and then it became the ambiance coordinator, and that's pretty much what it means. It's just, I just supply the good times.
Right. Well, that's part of your personality.
Yeah.
No, I know. Yeah, I didn't think it would be drugs, in your case. But it's one of the things when we first met on the road. That was one of the things that I got about you. Like you really enjoyed just sort of being, the cruise director in a way. It's like you're a lot of fun to be around.
Well, thank you.
You're a joyful guy.
It's fortunately it's just how I am.
Right.
I give it thought. I'm always thoughtful and thinking about what I say and what I do and how I act, and it's easier to smile than frown, as they say. You use less muscles, and I get such an enjoyment out of seeing other people happy. It's almost selfish,
Right.
I got to tell you, a moment for me in my career that it kind of tells you how I feel about this is I was with the Rolling Stones in Berlin, talking about the Stones in Berlin. And they were singing, You Can't Always Get What You Want. And I had the audience lights on, and all these Germans were in the audience. They were swaying back and forth, singing You Can't Always Get What You Want. And they were smiling and laughing. And I looked around and I thought, what a great job I have to be part of bringing all these people joy. Who else has a job that you can look around and see 80,000 singing, happy, dancing people? It's rare.
You literally get to shine the light on them.
Yes, exactly. And that's the best part about it. When I put the audience lights up, then they know they're being seen by the band.
Right.
And that makes them even more animated.
Can you talk about your creative process? And I know that it would be different with every artist, with every act, solo artists versus bands, management versus, dealing directly with the musicians that you work with. But say, for instance, with Aerosmith or AC/DC, who you've been with for a very long time, what's the creative process when you're starting a tour? Do you sit in the room with management or with the label or with the guys, and are they asking for your input? Do they have ideas for new technology, or do you just do your job and then they give you notes?
Well, that's a multifaceted answer on that. Different bands, like you said, have different things. Some bands want to have complete say and that kind of stuff, the artistic end of it. I've been very fortunate. I don't know, that's a good thing as well, but I've been fortunate that I work for bands that just pretty much give me artistic license and free reign, because they know I'm good at what I do. It's like I say, most bands, like AC/DC, most bands pay me so they don't have to talk to me about lights. And what I mean by that is they're concentrating on the show and performance. Of course we discuss lights. Some bands are more, here's how, basically a band comes up with a concept, or there'll be an album title. Like AC/DC, we had a tour, had an album called Ballbreaker. So we made a big giant crane with a big swinging ball on it. And the beginning of the show, there was this wall of foam bricks, and we knocked the wall down with the ball breaker. So it made sense. And I think in the older days, before there were big elaborate sets, the lighting rig was basically the set, was the big showpiece.
Right. That was everything.
So, you know, nowadays they make, you know, there's sets that are the size of buildings. But I still excel in doing old school big rock and roll rigs. You know, you know, you call it eye candy, whatever you want to call it. I mean, obviously you like the band, but you just want really nice looking, you know, show behind them and above them. But you're also, I mean, you know, getting to there's a certain colors you use for different, you know, moods and emotion, you know, simple, you know, stuff, you know, and, you know, like when I worked for Foreigner, Cold as Ice, I mean, I would do that song in blues and lavenders and greens and the colder colors, you know, Hot Blooded would be red and amber and yellow, you know, that's kind of simple, but you know, it's shocking how many people don't get it. But when they see a show, those colors evoke certain emotions, and that's what I try to stick to. It's pretty simple there, but still.
And do you automate a lot of the show, but then keep a manual on just for, you know, for faders, for spontaneity, for things that happen out of the ordinary?
No, I run the show manually. I mean, I obviously program the looks, but I run everything manually.
That's why
it's old school, you know, like AC/DC and Aerosmith and Foreigner, they play live, and you know, that adds another level, and when I'm running lights to them, it makes it even more real and human.
That makes sense. That's why when I've seen shows that you're lighting, it feels organic to me.
Yep.
It feels connected. You are essentially a band member.
Well, and Aerosmith is a prime example because they're organic. They play the songs like they wrote them, but they also go off into it. You know, Steven Tyler will start singing something, or Joe will start doing another solo. So it is organic, and and you know, the way I feel about live music is it's a human singing, or it's a human playing a guitar or drums. I mean, it connects with us on a cellular level. And when you do a recorded, it's not the same. You don't have that same human, you know, it's human to human when you're actually singing and playing an instrument. I mean, you're a musician, you know.
I get the feeling when I watch you work that you're singing the lyrics while you're moving lights around. I mean, because you're a fan of I would imagine most of the artists that you work with.
Well, I'm very lucky that I get to work for bands that I love their music. You know? And you're right. I'm not really singing the words, but it's in my head. You know, and I'm aware of every single note they're playing.
Right. So you're connecting emotionally to the song, and you're responding visually.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
And then we get to reap the benefits of how you interpret the music.
Yeah, exactly. And I, you know, and not only that, but the reaction from the audience.
Right.
You know,
you're taking that in as well.
Yeah.
And responding
just like the band
to that.
is.
Right.
You know, it's just this circle of, you know, passion that just keeps going. And it's just fantastic.
Yeah. And I think that's really exciting that you still keep it manual and organic, even though you certainly don't, you've got the ability to technically do anything that you can imagine at this point. I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, so you could automate a show if you wanted to, but that's not really how you approach music.
Well, it's exactly. It'd be like being a musician and having a guitar in your hand and playing to a track. You know,
every night the same thing, right?
It's obviously more fun performing and playing, and that's how I feel about running lights. It's fun, and I enjoy it, and it's, you know, it's you know, on the Aerosmith thing we're doing in Vegas, we've been doing a residency till the pandemic, but we toyed with the idea of doing some time code, and it made sense a couple of things, but for the most part, Aerosmith is, like you said, an organic band, and it just didn't work as well with them.
You were mentioning AC/DC, and one of the tours that you did back in '91. You were at Tushino Airfield in Moscow, and you had over 1.6 million fans in attendance.
That was unbelievable. I mean, that's to this day, that was one of the most incredible, you know, shows and events that I've ever done.
What did that feel like? I mean, even sound wise, were you just surrounded and encapsulated by more volume of audience and their response?
Well, I mean, it's not only, okay, so it was 1.6 million people, which in any 1.6 million people anywhere is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But here we were in Moscow. It was right after the coup they had in 1991. It was still, the Soviet Union. It was just barely after the wall had come down. And here are these, people, young and old, that had never seen this kind of music live, had seen these bands live. So not only was it 1.6 million people, it was like 1.6 million starving people for this kind of music and seeing something they'd never seen. That in itself was an incredible thing.
How do you adjust your, technically, how do you adjust gear-wise and approach with smaller venues and huge arenas? Because you do everything. You, especially with the groups that you work with, you could end up being involved in a small theater to what we're just talking about right now with hundreds of thousands of people and more. Does it change the way that you put the show together, put the gear together?
Well, obviously it's, bigger show needs more gear, or a theater show, you the smaller audience, smaller stage, then you go into arenas and stadiums. You want the production to be, the production value, you want it to be much larger, with each, exceeding size of venue. Especially in a stadium, because people in the back are seeing a band that are sub-miniature, so you want to make the entire stage a spectacle. Of course you have video screens and stuff like that, but if it's just guys on a stage and there's lights on the stage, it's a postage stamp. But if you light up the wings and the PA and you put up banners, or in AC/DC's and Rolling Stones cases, they build these big tremendous sets that are lit, and there's smoke and there's pyro. So yeah, I mean, the bigger the place you're playing, you definitely have to scale up the production value to make it fit.
And is pyro part of your crew, or is that another crew that you just integrate with? But
well, we integrate, but I mean, it's part of my field of expertise, I guess you'd say. When I'm designing a show,
right, I would
say, let's do pyro here, let's do this kind of pyro there, let's do, you pick certain effects, smoke and CO2 jets, that's all part of the the design of the show.
There's a quote that I read about you, and it's this: probably the best lighting designer you could ever hope to find, and one of the true gentlemen of the industry. I've worked with Cosmo on several tours over many years, since the mid-90s, I believe. If there's something about lights or design he doesn't know, I have no idea what it may be. He seems to be capable of providing a dynamic and artistic show from nothing more than a mag light. I thought that was a really good description of you, because again, it's about, like, you know how to work gear, you know how to design, you know how to do all of those things, but it's really about just your point of view, your intention, your vision, your passion, your curiosity, and like you said, your joy. So I guess it must be nice to hear people say things about you in that way, because it does kind of give a good summary of the essence of who you are as a person.
Well, yeah, I appreciate comments like that. I mean, I do what I do, like Papa, I am what I am. I've always said that, give me 2 par cans and a mag light, and I'll have a rock and roll show.
Right.
I don't want to use 2 par cans and a mag light, but I can. I'll make it work. Right. This is the thing, and I never say no, and that means in a lot of different ways. But there's always a way. We'll make it work. It's one of my favorite things I like to say is that there's no problems, only solutions. We'll fix it. We'll come up with something. Mm-hmm. The bands I work for, I never say no. I mean, maybe we can't do what they want, but I'll come up with an alternative, and that's what I'll tell them.
I want to remind our audience members that if anybody has a comment or a question, just to request coming on stage, and Dr. Lisa can bring you on. And while people are doing that, there's a couple of books that have influenced you, that we both have influenced both of us, and I wanted you to tell everybody what they are, and really your takeaway on each of those 2 books, why they really sort of set a strong direction for you in your life?
Well, it's I mean, I've read a lot of books, a lot of self-help books. I think they're important, and there's been a lot of books written over the years. I mean, there's been stuff written in the 1800s and the early 20th century. But How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie is one of my favorite books. A lot of people, especially my age, read that when they were young, like you did.
We both did, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it was such an insightful book on how to deal with other human beings. Growing up, you only know what you know just from growing up, but then you read stuff like that, and it's like when he had one comment in there that, one of the most important things you can do is remember somebody's name. He says, people, the most sacred thing to somebody is their name. And that stuck with me, you know what I mean? And I forget names. It's unfortunate, but I always try to remember names, and it is important. But that kind of stuff, that book was fantastic. And I wish more people would read it, especially nowadays, but that book was so influential to me. It really set my course in my life on how to deal with other people and other human beings, not just in, my hometown or the United States, but all over the world. Another book a more recent book, probably, 15 years ago now, was When the Secret by Rhonda Byrne came out. I mean, it's kind of a fad, and it was odd because I never watched TV. And one day I just turned on the TV and it was Oprah. I don't watch Oprah. And she had Rhonda Byrne on there talking about The Secret. And then getting back to how I feel about the universe gives you things and gives you signs. And I thought, well, there must be a reason. So I went out and bought the book, and it changed my life. It reinforced. I shouldn't say it changed my life. It reinforced what I'd already believed. And to have somebody else, when you start realizing other people believe it, and then that's the thing with The Secret, that you have, the universe will give you anything you want, anything you desire, anything you need. And then you realize it's something through the centuries. It's not just, she didn't just write the book, 15 years ago out of nowhere. It's The Secret is something that's been around for centuries, and people just don't get it. But you have to be told sometimes. So that book had a really huge influence on me.
And you have to be told at different times and multiple times, sometimes from different people, to finally, somebody will say something to you. This just happened to me the other day. I read something, heard something, mentioned it to Melanie, and she goes, "I've been telling you that."
Yeah, exactly. You have to listen,
which you think I would be good at as a musician. But again, sometimes you just hear it in a different way. You restructure the words in a different order, and it hits the target. One of the things about The Secret is the mission statement, because I looked it up yesterday, was our philosophy and vision at The Secret is to bring joy to billions, to bring joy to the world. We create life-transforming tools in the medium of books, films, and multimedia. But she used the word joy, which is the word that you used at the beginning of our conversation, and a word that I use a lot too, because I feel that one of the most wonderful things about what we do in the creative arts is we're in the joy business.
Yep.
And I've heard it
bring
said,
joy.
Yeah, we bring joy to people, and it's so wonderful to have the opportunity to be a conduit for joy.
Yeah, well, that's exactly how I feel. I mean, it's like I said before, it's almost selfish. It is selfish, because you get so much joy out of giving joy. It's almost criminal, and that's how I look at my life. And I got to tell you a story real quick about kind of the same thing about people. And this I was in Russia back in 2002 with the Scorpions, and we went way deep into Russia. We were there for 6 weeks. I mean, I ate a lot of borscht. But we were at a flea market in a city called, I think it was Novosibirsk or Omsk. It was in Siberia. And the group of the crew, there was like 5 of us walking around. We like going to flea markets. And, it wasn't anything like an American flea market, but there was still cool stuff there, tractors and shovels. And and there was guys selling CDs and stuff like that. And this woman came up to our interpreter, and she said she wanted my autograph. And I said to my interpreter, just tell her we're not the band, we're the crew. And she said in Russian, she says, "I know." She says, "But they're with the band. she says, and nothing like this has happened in our little village, and I just want a memento to hold. And I thought, how can I say no?
Right.
So I actually went to the CD. She was trying to get a Scorpions CD, and I couldn't find one, but I found an AC/DC CD. And I said, I work for AC/DC. So I signed it, and the rest of the crew signed it. And I was talking to her, and at the time, I think I was 41 or 42 years old. And I said to her, I said, how old are you? And she said she was like 40. And I said, it's funny. I said, when I was young in school, we were scared of the Russians. We were scared of the nuclear bomb coming in. And, we were always worried about the atomic bomb and, the Russians bombing us. And she said, it's funny. When I was a kid going to school in Russia, I was scared of the Americans bombing us with the nuclear bomb.
The same thing. And
we just laughed and we said, and we realized we're the same people. We're the same. Everybody's the same. Humanity is the humanity. And that was very enlightening to me. But it was, that's a story I really like, and it means a lot to me.
In Florida, because you and I are close to the same age. I've got a couple of years on you, but we practiced hiding under our desk.
Yeah.
In case of a nuclear bomb. Which, even at the time, I thought, this is crazy. How can a piece of wood protect me?
I know
they were wood desks, right?
There's all the TV shows, and in New York there were fallout shelters, and they fallout and they explained to you they're down in the basement, and you had you covered the windows with the leaded blankets, and I'm like, we're in Florida, and it's like we don't have basements,
right? And in Miami, I'm not sure about in Orlando if it had the same impact. I would imagine it did, but we were close to Cuba, so there was the Cuban Missile crisis as well.
Same in Orlando. Plus, we had McCoy Air Force Base, which was a SAC base with B-52 bombers. You guys had Homestead, which was an Air Force,
exactly.
So, fighter base. So yeah, we were close to major bases.
Very similar. Yeah. With all the traveling that you've done in your career and will continue to do, what have you learned about staying healthy, both physically and emotionally, mentally, spiritually?
Well, it's fortunately moderation is key. My mother taught me at a young age that moderation is key. I like to drink, I like to eat bad foods, but I try to be careful of overeating and imbibing and anything. Even when I did drugs, I was never a big I didn't overdo it.
And by the way, you're kind of a wine connoisseur also. It's not just that you like to drink.
Yeah, I love wine.
So continue on. So it's really about moderation, and it's just something.
Well, it's about moderation, and this is one thing I feel about food. I think, there's the cool thing about this is once again traveling. I talk about the people, and I talk about seeing these things, and the culture, but there's something I love about food because the term breaking bread,
right?
And having a meal with somebody. I mean, anywhere you go, and especially getting back to Russia, they would be so happy to have us in restaurants and show us the local cuisines. Just like, Americans, everybody's the same way. They want to show you the local food and the local cuisine, the local beer, the local vodka, the local wine. That's another joyful thing, giving of food. So my getting back to the healthy part of it, I think it's healthy, even if the food isn't healthy, the love of it, the enjoyment of it is good. It's healthy for the heart, the soul part of your heart. So that's something. I've had so many wonderful meals with people, and that granted, okay, maybe they weren't the best health-wise, for my belly or for my arteries,
right?
But they brought a certain joy that that bring a different level of health
to your spirit, right?
But I mean, I've always, I work out a little bit. I try to get a good night's sleep. You can't always do that. You work long hours on the road and stuff, but again, moderation is key, and I'm a healthy person, and I try to keep it that way.
And when you say you're a healthy person, you're talking about the whole picture.
Yeah, mentally and physically. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Because there are a lot of people that go to the gym 5 days a week, 7 days a week, but they're forgetting about the rest of the healthy parts of living.
The joy. Yeah.
The joy. There you go again. Right.
You know, and once again, moderation is key.
Including with exercise.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, one of the things about exercise, even weightlifting, you basically grow. You know, you lift a weight, you tear the muscle, and in the recovery of the muscle is when you get more built. You know,
exactly.
So so it really is. You know, if you don't bring moderation into working out, you're not going to get stronger. You're not going to get healthy.
You'll hear every weightlifter say that. You got to give it a break to heal.
Right. Lisa, you've been sitting on the sidelines. Do you have anything you want to join in and say?
Yes, I am so enjoying this. And hi, Cosmo.
Hi, Lisa.
I am having a 6th degree of separation moment. But before I do that, I want to say hi and thank you to Woody, Barry, Troy, and Deanna, who have been hanging in here with us on the show and enjoying this. And if any of you have a question, please go ahead and type it in the React and I'll get to you. Cosmo, so I know your name is actually Charles, which is 1 degree. My dad's name is Charles.
Awesome.
But I want you to tell the story of how you got the nickname Cosmo. And I'm going to share a secret that Cosmo and I have both done pageants.
Together?
Wow.
And now I'm gonna. Well, we were really close because I was in the Miss USA pageant in Florida.
You're kidding me.
Yes, but I think you were already gone. But please tell how you got the nickname Cosmo and where that happened.
Well, I was when I first started working for the union in Florida. We worked in Lakeland. Lakeland was where all the concerts were. I mean, it was the big, you know, it was between Orlando and Tampa, and every rock and roll band was there. 3 years in a row, the Miss Universe, which owns Miss USA, decided to do. They did Miss Teen USA there, and then that was in '82, I think, or '83. Then in '84 and '85, they did the Miss USA pageant. So I worked down as a stagehand, and we would be in there. The stage was tremendously large. It was built out of wood, and you know, I mean, it took us 6 weeks to build the stage, and then it was one night. And then there's rehearsals, of course, and stuff like that. But so there was a crew of New York. The guys that would the guys that would oversee the show were from New York. And there was a New York stagehand named Joe, and I'd worked with him on 3 times. The first time and so the second time in 1984, he started calling me Rasputin. He's one of these New York guys that just calls you a nickname. Hey Joe, get over here. Hey, hey buddy. Hey Rasputin, get over here. So and then like a week later, he started calling me Cosmo Brown, and I said okay, and he says Cosmo Brown, come and give me a hand. And then a week later, he said, listen, he says, you're doing really good. I was young. He says, you're really kicking butt for me. He says, I always give the guys I like a nickname. He said, so Rasputin was the first one. Now you're Cosmo Brown. He says he says, if you got to reach my 3rd plateau. If you reach my 3rd plateau, I'm going to give you another nickname. And he told me this name. And I said, okay. And he says, but for now, you're still Cosmo Brown. So a week later, he comes to me and he says, all right, you know what? You worked your butt off this week for me. You've made it to my 3rd plateau. He says, you got to do one more thing for me and you're there. And I said, what's that? He says, tell me the name I told you. And I, for the life of me, couldn't remember. He says, well, you made it to my 3rd plateau, but from now on, you're Cosmo Brown. So that was in '84. And so a couple of the guys in the union called me Cosmo as a joke. Cosmo Brown. Well, in 1986, I was out on Genesis. We just started the tour. We were about a week in. And the crew chief head rigger was named Charlie Boxall, and our production manager Morris Lyda said we can't have 2 Charlies on the crew. So, and since he's your boss, you got to come up with a nickname, or we'll come up with one for you. And I thought, God forbid they call me something like Spermhead or Poopy or something. And I said, you know what, Cosmo. And they said, all right, you're Cosmo, and that was that.
Amazing.
That's beautiful story.
What are the chances that Cosmo would have done the USA pageant?
That's amazing.
We probably just missed each other because in '86 it moved to Miami.
Right.
And that's when that's the year I was there.
So, oh wow.
Yeah, that was cool. And I know Terry talked about your love of World War II, but you also talked about if you were not doing lighting, your love for those things and airplanes is really deep. Because share with the audience what you think you'd be doing if you had not gone into this career.
If I was a rock and roll lighting designer, I'd be a fighter jet pilot in the U.S. Air Force.
Now, did you have military and folks in your family?
No, I just have this love of airplane. I think when I was young, my grandparents owned a trailer park in Sanford, Florida, and it was right underneath the flight path for Sanford Naval Air Station. So I grew up with jets flying over day and night because it was during the Vietnam War. So, I used to go watch them do touch and go. So I've always loved airplanes.
Did you ever get a pilot's license?
No, I learned to fly, and I made the joke about flying airliners. I actually fly simulators down in Melbourne, Australia, and I can fly an airliner. I can land it if I need to.
That's a good skill.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Hey, and speaking of personal stories, I'd love for you to share another one in honor for the people who are going to be watching this on YouTube or Instagram, because we're videotaping as well. I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt in honor of you, because I know that that's something that is meaningful and fun for you. What's your connection with Hawaiian shirts? How did that start?
Well, I mean, living in Florida, you always had Hawaiian shirts to go to the beach and stuff. And
right.
And and when I was in New York working in the early days, it was all leather. I had black leather, and then I'd come back to Florida and put my Hawaiian shirt on. And when I became a lighting guy, I didn't wear them when I was working then because I was climbing trusses and it wasn't,
right.
But I always had one for my day off. And when I became a lighting designer, I started, buying more and more. And part of it, there's two reasons. I mean, first of all, I'm a lighting designer, and my shirts are like my lighting rigs, bright and colorful.
Right.
But it also, for me, it's a reflection of my personality, bright, colorful, and cheerful.
Yeah.
So it reflects me, my work, and my heart.
Well, it made it kind of fun. It made me want to get to know you better when we first met. You did.
So there you go. I cannot tell you how many comments I get every day when people say, "Oh, I love your shirt."
Right.
Yesterday I was at the grocery store and they said, "Oh, I love your shirt."
Yeah. You've been doing this for a long time. We actually all have. But what do you think has changed the most in the arts and in our business during your career, and what's remained the same?
Well, I mean, obviously technology has advanced incredibly. I mean, you used to have incandescent lights that just shone on a stage with a color filter in front of it. Now they move and they flash and they tilt, and they have all these different parameters, which I think is great. Technology wise, it's very, very different, but it's still, at the end of the day, it's a light coming out of a source onto an artist.
Mm-hmm.
I think the shows have gotten a lot more technical, a lot more magical. There's all these things you can do now to wow the audience.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing that hasn't changed for the most part is that live performance. Like I said, that connection of a live, I mean, I don't have a problem with people like Britney Spears lip syncing. At least it's something they sang. I understand that, and it's the whole package of the show. But the one thing that hasn't changed is when you have a live performance in front of you. As I said, it connects to your cells.
It sure does.
It connects to you. That there's nothing like that.
Right. And you keep saying this, but it's so true. It connects all of us. It doesn't just connect to us, it connects us all. And it's pretty remarkable. That's not just music, art in general.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I mean, I think the pandemic is a prime example of how people have been starved for that live entertainment. I mean, mm-hmm. I didn't see anything live, and then it's a little biker bar 4 miles from my house, and I went up there and saw 2 guys playing, and I was just enthralled with the live music because I hadn't seen it in so long. There's nothing like it.
Right. It really is a thrill. I'm so grateful and excited that it's starting to come back. We're so many of us are being mindful in not only being safe for ourselves but to our audience members. Do you have any kind of perspective or information or predictions? I'm not talking about exactly when you're going out on the road again, but do you see safe ways for us all to be gathering again?
Well, I personally, I think they keep saying a new normal. I don't think there'll be a new normal. I think it'll go back to the old normal. I mean, we survived the Spanish flu,
mm-hmm.
And there was never a vaccine for that. We will get mindful of things, but it will go back to normal. People will gather. I think in the middle of the pandemic, I always said if AC/DC did a stadium show, it would sell out. You know, there's still people that don't care.
Right.
And I think we will be back to normal sooner than later.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some people who won't, but most people will. The bands, I mean, for instance, like you take a band like Aerosmith. Let's go with AC/DC. AC/DC spends a lot of money on a show, on a production, like we were saying. They carry a huge set and worldwide because that's what the people expect. That's what the audience wants to see. So they're a worldwide touring band. You know, when they do a tour, it's got to be a world tour. It's going to be difficult because until all the other countries have, you know, gotten over the coronavirus on their own, there's going to be a lot of places we wouldn't be able to play. But you take a smaller band, or even a band like Aerosmith, who doesn't necessarily, they do big productions, but they can do, you know, they don't have to do as much of a production. They could play in the United States. They wouldn't have to tour, you know, but being, you know, I worked for Foreigner for years. They're touring right now. Sammy Hager's touring right now. There's a lot of acts that want to tour the U.S. and they can get away with that because they don't carry this tremendously large production. Like the Stones have a big production.
Right.
You know, anything like that is going to be difficult to tour the world. But I think the United States is going to be the mecca of tours soon, this summer. And by next year, the floodgates will open.
Before we get to my closing questions, I wanted to ask what causes, or I guess causes is a good choice of word. What causes are close to your heart?
Well, you know, the animal causes I like because animals are helpless and they depend on us. I have a huge love for the military, you know, and it's just unbelievable to me that these guys go, you know, in war situations, and then they come back and we have to have organizations that help take care of them. I'm like, the United States government should be taking care of them, but that's very near and dear to my heart.
Right.
Any organization, I like organization. Okay, there's a lot of organization for people who need help, but I love one thing I do have, and there's not any particular organizations. There's some smaller ones, but the ones that there's young people who have this immense amount of talent and just need some guidance or need some help, scholarships and stuff like that, you know, because sometimes I get concerned that there's people who are very talented that get left by the wayside because they don't have the direction, you know. So, and that's almost a mentoring thing, you know, which is what I always say: pay it forward, pay it back. You know, that's why when I'm on the road, I'm always pushing the young guys, you know, to come with me and see the world.
Was it did you get that mentoring or the pay it forward gene from your family? Or is that just something, I mean, do you remember being taught that? I do. You know, that it was important to give back in some way.
Yeah, well, yeah, my whole family, my grandmother used to say, you can be anything you want to be, you know. When I was 16 years old, I told my mother I wanted to be a rock star, and she didn't say, oh, you're never going to amount to nothing. She said, then you're going to be a rock star. So. Great. So that probably came from there, but I you know, I think I started very young in my career, and in New York in 1979, and I had people pushing me up instead of pushing me down. You know, I had people, you know, I don't know. I was very fortunate. They would say, can you tune a piano? Can you tune this? Can you do that? And I would say yes, and they would let me. Even my first job I had, it didn't go so well, but they gave me a second chance. You know,
and yeah, I'm a big believer in the power and the importance of saying yes as well. I even have an album called Say Yes, and it was really based on that. It was and again, it doesn't mean that I don't know how to say no, but most of the incredible things that have happened to me in my life, career-wise and personally, was because I said yes to things that were kind of unexpected. Usually unexpected, through a side door, like you're talking about.
Yep.
Can you tune a piano? Can you do this? Can you do that? And if you think it's something you can do, you say yes, and then you go figure out how to do it.
Yeah, well, that's exactly how I feel. They said, can you tune a Wurlitzer? You know, Wurlitzer, it has tines. You do the solder. I mean, there's a way to do it, but you don't need to do it. But it's, you know, it's kind of a joke question. But still, I learned how to tune a Wurlitzer.
Right.
But the one thing was saying, It'd been back when 79 when I was doing that, YouTube didn't exist.
Right.
Now YouTube exists. I mean, I can say, yeah, I can do it. Hang on one second. And I look on YouTube, bam, and I know how to do it. I mean,
right.
It's the young people today have it made.
Right.
You can find a video on anything,
That is so
flying
true.
a plane, no problem.
That's incredibly accurate. Mike, let's get to my closing questions, and then I want to give final words to you as well. Since this show is called Making It, what does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally?
Making it, to me, is succeeding, but not succeeding at all costs. Not succeeding. To me, it's more personal success. It's like in the beginning of the show, you were talking about the awards I'd won, and I won my first award, I think, like 2015. That was 6 years ago. So I've been in the business 42 years. So, as the saying goes, it took me, 30 some years to become an overnight success.
Right.
So, and they had awards, things like that. And sometimes I got nominated a couple times, and people, I'm very honored to get any award that the ones, I display them proudly at home. I'm honored and humbled beyond belief when I get these, when I've won these awards, and the fact that I've won several is just unbelievable to me. But I always say the fact that the bands I work with ask me back, and the fact that I get the accolades, that means to me that's making it. When my whole thing is how I'm for lack of a better word, I'm a people pleaser, and I don't mean I'm trying to please people, but I want to bring joy. And when I get that kind of feedback, that to me is making it. That's the kind of legacy. That's making it both personally and professionally. That kind of thing when you're loved by people, and that means so much to me. And that's making it to me.
Can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Yeah. Never say no. Never say no is one. Always have blind faith. It's just, that's such a hard thing. It's such an easy thing to say. Just have the faith and the confidence, and it ain't easy, but you have to. I also, another thing I will say that it's just going to sound strange, and it sounds strange to people when I say it, but one of my mantras is there's no such thing as a wrong decision. Mm-hmm. And what that does is when I make a decision, I'm comfortable with it. It could be construed as a wrong decision. Maybe things didn't turn out like you wanted them to on one hand, but on the other hand, you learned. And that's the key. And that's why I always say that. So when I make a decision, if things don't turn out right, I go, well, I won't do that again, but you learn, and there's one other thing. This is one thing that I think is very important, because, you've heard Michael Jordan, how many free throws he's missed, and stuff like that. But the Dalai Lama, this is one of my favorite sayings, and it goes like this: sometimes not getting what you want is a wonderful stroke of luck. And that right there, that's one of the most important things, because if you don't get it, it's going to work. You got to have that positive attitude. Okay, something else is better. Mm-hmm. Something else is going to, and that's, to me, is the most important thing in my career path, is realizing that, okay, I wasn't meant to have that. Let's go this direction, instead of beating my head against something that's the wrong thing.
Right. Well, our audience likes that too. I'm in total agreement with you on that. Cosmo, one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is reading your memoir, because I know that you have started writing a book, kind of stories from the road, of course, and things that you've learned, but just personal perspective as well. And what inspired you to begin that, and where are you at with that?
Well, I've always kept, especially when I went on the road. Going on the road in 1986 was a dream come true. Mm-hmm. It was just, so I started a travel log, a travel diary, and which I still have. And then I kept notes, and I would just, I think what it was is I realized how lucky, how fortunate, how blessed, I'm full of gratitude, and that's important, is to be thankful. But so I just would always make notes, and I thought how lucky my life is, and the things I get to do, and the things I've seen, and I've met rock stars and famous people, and gone to all these places, and And, you know, I thought, and I got a pretty interesting life. And then I started writing a book, I don't know, 20 years ago, and just on my computer.
Right.
And then I met a friend of mine, a guy named Charlie Valera, who's a book writer, and we're both into airplanes. And we became friends, and we were kind of joking around about writing a book. And he said, "I love your story. I'd love to write your book." And I jokingly said, "Yeah, I kind of got I got one on my computer." And he said, "No, I'm serious." So we had our first meeting in October of 2019. And, you know, I thought, well, we'll see how this goes. And it was interesting. And he started writing, and I read about it. I'm reading what he wrote, and I thought, boy, I'd like to meet this guy, Cosmo Wilson. You know, this sounds like an interesting life. So, and then fast forward to February of 2020, when this pandemic hit, all of a sudden I had time.
Right.
So I would go down to his house in Cape Coral, and he would videotape me. You know, videotape me. Well, there's a term from the 1990s. He would film me, and then he would transpose it. He would transcribe it to paper, and I would go there about every month for like 3 days, and it was just so much fun. And I would just tell stories, and he's such a great writer, and he writes how I speak, because everybody reads my stories and go, I can hear you telling the story.
Right, I can hear your voice.
Yeah, so yeah, we're pretty far along, you know, and I've been kind of lazy about it sometimes, and I should, but he's been working, him and his wife both have been working on it, and now I've got a new opportunity in St. Louis, so I'm up here, so he's kind of working on the book on his own, but you know, it's all there. It just needs to be edited, and you know, I've proofread by me and stuff, and of course, every day I'm coming up with different things and making notes I want to add to the book, and it's like we've already got 50 chapters. I can't add anymore, but still, it's my life, and you know.
You use the words "a dream come true," and I remember the feeling of my first tour, and I actually didn't even. I had these two moments of really believing that my dreams were happening. Wheels Up, that sound of the wheels locked. Yep. I mean, it wasn't even when I was sitting on the plane. I was touring with Billy Preston, and we were heading to Germany, and
wow.
and it was incredible. And 1981, and I still thought, I was just afraid it wasn't going to happen. You just, because it's so incredible.
Yeah.
You know, when you dream of something from when you were a kid, and then you work towards it to get your craft together and your personal skills together, and being physically healthy and all those things. So Wheels Up was a huge moment for me. And then that first time on stage, you know, and it was remarkable. I mean, what do you remember about that experience? What was it the same for you?
Well, it's the first thing I did is I got a story. I mean, I got to tell you the story. I'll try to keep it short, but it's going back to how the universe lines things up. I mean, this is the incredible moment in my life. I was married at the time, and I was living in a home, and we sold it. We were trying to get another home. We were waiting for to get approved on it. So we moved into my wife's sister's and her husband's home, waiting. And we ended up not getting we didn't get approved on the house for various reasons. And at the time I was living with her sister and her husband, and let's say they were really good friends of ours, but he wasn't the most reliable. And meantime, I had this company I was trying to get a job through, TTR, was a lighting company. And I called them every week. I thought, I'm gonna call them every week until I get a job. And so what had happened is we didn't get the house, so we got an apartment that day, and it was a Thursday, and we had moved. And I gave the number to my brother-in-law, and I said, here, if Richard calls, give him my new number to the apartment we're getting. And you also got to remember, it was back in 1986, so the phone wasn't going to be turned on until Monday.
Right.
So we moved. The weekend happened. Monday morning, I needed a new muffler on my car, so I drove up to the Midas muffler shop. And this is how the universe works. So Richard Hartman calls my brother, who usually sleeps in. He calls him in the morning. He answered the phone. He said, I'm trying to get in touch with Charlie Wilson. He said, hang on, let me get his new number. So he found the number, which is another, you know. And then he called the number, which had to be turned on, and it had just come on. My wife at the time had to know where I was, so she called Midas. He found me. I called Richard. He said, you need to be in Chicago tomorrow morning to work The Cure, or he asked me, and I said, yes.
Right.
So all those things had to line up. If one of those things would have been a little bit off, I would still be sitting in the Midas Muffler Shop.
The synchronicity of it all.
Yes, exactly. So, but fast forward. So that moment you're talking about, Wheels Up, for me, okay, getting on the plane was great and all that. For me, I dreamed of sleeping on a tour bus. But that meant you were on the road. And that night I flew to Chicago. We were at Poplar Creek. We did the show. We loaded out. I took a shower. I got in my bunk, and you could not wipe the grin off my face. I could not sleep. I was just, to that moment, I'll never forget how I felt at that moment climbing into that bunk. That was it. I was there, And then when I went out with Genesis, I was out with Genesis the next tour, and then I got my ticket to Sydney, Australia. Mm. Actually, it was Auckland, New Zealand, as it was, but we stopped in Sydney. But I got that ticket, and I was like, man, I'm traveling. It was, yeah.
You have such a remarkable memory about the events in your life and the experiences, to even remembering that it was a Thursday that you moved into that apartment.
Yeah.
It's kind of remarkable to me. So I can't wait to read your book. Take your time getting it done, make it right, and know that you can have part two. You can have a second book as well. But is your memory always just been that sharp that you can remember details like that?
Yeah, I have a pretty good memories. I mean, I can remember pretty good details. I mean, like there's people like Mary Lou Henner who can remember what they had for lunch and what shoes they wore on December 12th, 1977. But yeah, I couldn't tell you that. But I have pretty good memories about, events and tours and places. And, I'm very fortunate, which helps me write the book.
Yeah, absolutely. My closing question that I ask all of my guests is, at this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
Invest wisely. Buy Apple stock. If people say, if you could be anybody, who would you want to be? I'd say me.
Yeah.
I've thought about this. I wouldn't really tell my younger self anything. Just continue doing what you're doing. I'm very, seize the moment, time flies, you know what I mean? And I think I would tell I don't know. I'm kind of doing let me rephrase that. I probably wouldn't change anything because I like the way I've done things. I mean, it's important to me to realize how important the moment is, and how and spending time with people I think I would tell my take advantage of every moment. But I've always had that, I've always tried to take advantage of every moment. And also I read something the other day that was really good. It said now is the time I was worrying about 5 years ago, or I can't remember how it went, but the thing is appreciate now. Mm-hmm. You really need to appreciate now. People don't, they keep putting stuff off. Oh, in 5 years, when this is done, no, appreciate the moment, appreciate it right now. That's what I would tell my younger self, but I've been really good at that. I've always tried to, but as I get older, I realize how important that was,
how important that has been.
Yes.
And the value of continuing to do that through the rest of your life.
Yes. That's be the one thing. I mean, here's the thing. If I would have bought Apple stock in 1984 and I was a billionaire now, my life would be much different. And I don't want that. I want what I have. I like where I am right now.
Right.
It's of course I wish I had more money in my retirement fund, but on the other hand, I'm fortunate, lucky, and I love what I do, and I love working, and I enjoy, friendships, and this is what life's all about, is enjoying the moment.
You are a true spreader of joy and keeper of joy in the world, and I've seen that in action. I've watching you work, but also just getting the opportunity just to hang and talk with you today. It's a really special part of who you are. I really appreciate that in you.
Well, thank you. It means a lot to me. It really does. I like being the spreader of joy. I mean, it's just fulfilling.
Yeah. Final words. Is there anything on your mind or your heart that you'd like to share with our audience before we say our goodbyes?
Well, I mean, I think we covered a lot. I mean, your questions were great, and you gave me an opportunity, to say, how I feel and stuff, and like you say, it's just continuing to spread the joy. That's the most important thing. People. One thing I will say is you don't realize how actions and words and things affect other people. And I don't mean in a bad way. I mean, it can be in a bad way, but even in a good way. Just little things you do can make such a positive smile. This is the thing I can't stand about masks. I understand why we're wearing masks, but humans are made to smile, and then I get so much joy walking anywhere, down a grocery aisle and smiling at somebody and they smile back. And I guess what it's done is it's made us realize how important it is to see other people's faces and how important that is. But just one little gesture can make someone's day, and that's if you give it thought, and I'll always try to give joy. I want to say one thing. My house, that me and Deanna give our house a name. We call it Happy Joy Love.
You do?
That's what it is. Yeah, so that's the name of our house.
That's fantastic. I love that. I love it. Well, on behalf of Dr. Lisa, thank you for joining the conversation, moderating with us today. I really appreciate you being here with us.
Pleasure.
And to our live virtual audience and to all the people that are listening and watching, on behalf of Cosmo and myself, we thank you for spending your time with us and allowing me the opportunity to share Cosmo's story. I so appreciate it. So, Cosmo, it's great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on. Like I said, I'm honored. So I've enjoyed this very much.
Everybody, take good care. Stay safe. Stay inspired. We appreciate you.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Woolman.